welcome all, and our speaker this evening is Jeananne N9VSV, who will be talking about amateur radio philately, unless you're Italian, in which case it's philately. No. Jeananne.
Thank you, Bill. First off, happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Tell your significant other how much you appreciate that they let you either come to the meeting or take some time away from them to attend via Zoom. Second aside is that Stan has brought some of his collection of stamps, in particular to show off the only United States stamp that was ever issued honoring amateur radio. And he's going to be passing those books around while I talk. So, amateur radio philately, or stamp collecting. Now, tonight's program is about stamp collecting, but that word, philately, it's an interesting word that I've heard pronounced different ways. If you live on the other side of the pond, it's pronounced philately. To help me remember how it's pronounced, postage is flat. So philately it is. Etymology of the word explains that it was coined in the mid-1800s in France, but it's derived from the Greek philo, meaning an attraction or affinity for something, and atalia, meaning it's exempt from duties and taxes. Well, in this case, the recipient is exempt, not the sender. This presentation was not supposed to be really one on stamp collecting, but I ended up including some basics. As with any hobby, stamp collecting comes with learning technology, learning terminology, knowledge of catalog numbers, handling stamps with tongs and gloves. And while I've learned a lot about this hobby, I wanted to approach my collecting in a fun, lighthearted manner. This really is more of a show and tell kind of presentation. I would recommend getting the basic supplies, including gloves, magnification devices, and tongs. And please note that the tongs have rounded edges. That's so you don't poke holes into your stamps. In 2003, I purchased an older used set of Scott catalogs for about $30 each. These catalogs contain just about every stamp ever issued worldwide up to the date of the book, and each stamp is given a Scott number. There are other catalogs, but the Scott system is pretty universal. The cost is about $600 to get the 2024 catalog set, but the information is online now, mostly for free. So how did this all get started? Well, when I was tall enough to reach the mailbox, I collected the daily mail. I loved looking at the postage, and I was always more interested in the stamp than what was inside the envelope. Well, fast forward to when I was about 12 years old, I saw an ad much like this one in the Sunday comics. I believe I taped 2 nickels to the back of the form and mailed it and waited what seemed like an eternity for my exotic stamps. I don't remember how I did this without my folks knowing about it, but when my stamps arrived, my mother quickly intercepted with proclaiming, "They can't transact business with a minor." Well, I didn't even know what a minor was. Well, the very next day, pardon? Right. Ken Boston said a minor works in a cave, for those of you at home. Well, the very next day, she returned the stamps with a letter warning them to cease their relationship with her daughter. And for some reason, I was grounded for a whole week. Well, it might be hard to see in the ad up here, but there's a small highlighted paragraph that the real issue, I mean, with these stamp companies is that this is the catch-all. This is saying that they're going to send you a huge envelope of stamps on approval with a very short timeline to return what you don't want. Steep penalties were charged if the deadline was not met. So in all fairness, my mom knew best. I never did get my 10 cents back, and I thought that that was the end of my stamp collecting days. Well, fast forward to 1993. Gary got his amateur radio license in September. My license arrived in the mail in December. Gary's January QST arrived the very next day, and I could not have been more excited. I think it was fate. This is the cover of that issue, and I honestly don't think Gary has ever gotten a chance to read this issue. An interesting side note about the article highlighted on this cover is that the collection shown on the cover was not that of the author, but it belonged to his wife, who was not a ham. So I ignored just about all the articles on stamp collecting, mostly advice on setting a clear path of what you want to collect. Stamp collecting isn't just about collecting actual postage stamps. Collections can also include postal stationery, which I'll try to explain as we go. Thematic collections, such as amateur radio, can cover a multitude of topics or sub-themes. And I soon realized I would never be able to collect everything, but I tried. So here are some of the categories I started to pursue. I found scouting jamboree stamps and stationery. In this case, first day covers or envelopes with the stamp canceled on the first day of issue. These two envelopes or covers have stamps that are clearly not amateur radio related, but what's depicted on the covers fit the criteria with the photographs and sketches. Hand cancellations, like the one on the cover from Portugal, is called a fancy cancel, by the way, and it can be a theme all on its own. I know people who collect just decorative cancellations. Okay, here's another cover with a generic stamp and cancellation that is completely Boy Scout related. This envelope includes what's called an insert card describing the event. It states, the original cover design shows Scouts operating ham radio, an important means of communication on Cyprus. Insert cards can be both informative, but most importantly, it keeps the envelope stiff. So more jamboree stamps and souvenir sheets. Now, a souvenir sheet is a sheet of stamps issued in conjunction with or to commemorate an event. The stamps on souvenir sheets are usually embedded inside the sheet. Now, you'll notice on these examples that the two souvenir sheets, the one on top left and the one center to the right, none of the perforations are on the edge of that sheet. So that's what I mean by being embedded in the sheet. The man you see on at least two of these stamps is the founder of the Boy Scouts, Lord Robert Baden-Powell. The first edition of the Boy Scout Handbook in 1910 taught boys how to transmit Morse code, and building a radio receiver was once deemed an obligatory Scout skill. However, I've not found any information on Lord Baden-Powell ever having an amateur radio call sign. Well, then I found stamps on electrical components and the like, resistors, transistors, tubes, and even the Marconi spark gap. One could collect pioneers of electricity, inventors, and scientists such as Ampere, Hertz, Morse, Tesla, Volta, Popov. Look at the artwork on these postcards from Russia. It is just amazing, I think. And let's not forget this guy, Marconi. And yes, there is a stamp that is upside down. Second column, last stamp in the column. And there is one askew. Now, keeping these stamps straight for scanning was like herding cats. And Marconi, wow, more. Born in 1874 and more, inventing the radio in 1895 and more. Many of the stamps you see will be commemorating either his birth, 100 years of his birth, or 100 years of him inventing the radio. I didn't set out to collect all of these. These were a part of an estate auction that I successfully bid on. Okay, and there's even more paths. There are stamps with straight keys. The stamp from the Republic of Djibouti, the stamp, the gray stamp on the top here is from Djibouti, and the Morse code on that stamp spells out the word Morse. Then there are more categories that I kind of fell down the rabbit hole with. Famous people who are hams. And these examples really don't scratch the surface of what's available. Now, the Prince of Morocco, CN8AA, the Kings of Spain, EA0JC, and Jordan, JY1, Reverend Colby, SP3RN, now he's the patron saint of amateur radio, and even cosmonauts such as Yuri Gagarin, UA1LO. It's endless, really. These are generic stamps that don't reflect amateur radio whatsoever. We just know that they're hams. Oh yeah, and there's a queen on this example as well. Queen Sophia of Spain, C02YQ. Which kind of led me down the road of stamps and stationery that highlighted women in the hobby. There's another stamp of Queen Sophia up there, and the set of 3 stamps from Colombia happened to be a commemorative set of Miss Universe 1959 from Colombia. Her name was Luz Marina Zuluaga, HK6LT. And check out this cover from the 2006 International YL meeting in India. In addition to the information on the cover, just look at this cancellation of the YL wearing headphones and a boom mic. So another cancellation that speaks volumes is the YLRL. It stands for the Young Ladies Radio League. And that's on the envelope from the Dayton Hamvention. Lastly, the first day cover from Japan has everything. The sketch, the stamp, and the cancellation are all amateur radio related. So needless to say, this could get out of hand rather quickly. So I revisited the article in QST that started this all, and I realized I needed to concentrate on the stamps that commemorate radio clubs, de-expeditions, and events in which ham radio served an integral part. I'm happy to say that I have found all but one of the items on that cover. So what follows are scans of the stamps that I have. I think the stamps rather speak for themselves. There's 72 countries represented in this presentation. And if I described every one, we could be here all night. but I will point out some things I found interesting. Now, the first thing I noticed about these stamps was that many include a symbol much like the ARRL diamond, which got me questioning, why do we have this diamond-shaped symbol that's used by so many amateur radio leagues? Well, it all started in 1920 when the ARRL was looking for an emblem. After soliciting members in QST, they received numerous suggestions and even drawings. In July of 1920, they announced that the new design would appear on everything ARRL, but their immediate concern was for a lapel pin or a button. Boy, that would be recognizable by others in the league. A sign of "Hail, fellow, well met." A not-so-secret handshake between fellow brothers. And other countries followed us. So let's go back one slide. Cool, that worked. Two of these stamps, Costa Rica and Djibouti. Now, Costa Rica, there's two stamps, but I am referring to the second stamp from Costa Rica. And the one from Djibouti up here also have straight keys and could, by all rights, be put on the first slide that I had with just straight keys. And look at the stamp from Germany showcasing a Collins KWM2. That's tuned to 21.275 megahertz. So it's the detail on these stamps that just kind of blows me away. So let's get back on track here. I appreciate the sheer artistry displayed on these stamps. Examples also include Israel, where you have two amateur radio operators working each other from different ends of the world. And who else but the king would be on stamps commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Royal Jordanian Amateur Radio Society? These 5 stamps right here. Now, it's super, super teeny tiny, but his call sign, JY1, is in the radio waves on each stamp. And Norfolk Island, back in the day, many small islands depended on amateur radio to communicate with the outside world. Now we have some stamps here from Pitcairn Islands. And it's another set of small islands commemorating their amateur radio club. Now, the first has the call signs of the members. The second features a member calling for medical assistance. The third shows medical assistance being received. And the fourth shows their first operator. Now, the San Marino stamp, right here, this blue one, there's Morse code on there that spells out RSM, or Radio San Marino. And I have to say it again, I will be always impressed with how many countries have issued stamps that highlight our hobby. Now, I also have a small collection of covers, envelopes that reflect our hobby. This one is from Solomon Island Radio Society. And interestingly, the sketch on the cover matches the stamp. Now, the next 4 slides, they're all from Sweden. And note the cancellations on these envelopes. This cancellation is in recognition of the 40th anniversary of amateur radio services in Sweden. Here's the 50th anniversary cancellation. Not sure what this cancellation was for, but it is clearly amateur radio. As is this one. Now, these two are for the same event, but canceled at two different postal stations. And when you think of the amount of postal stations that there are in the world, there could be a lot of envelopes or covers out there celebrating this event, but with slightly different cancels. And this cancellation on an old envelope from Poland. As well as pre-printed postage on this postcard from Poland. And nothing really does prepare me for Russian postage and postal stationery. As was seen in an earlier slide highlighting Alexander Popov, they really know how to commemorate special people and events. So here's one from a D expedition to the Isle of Pabade, just off the coast of Scotland. The stamp on the right obviously is not amateur radio related, but the stamp on the left is a local issue that reflects the event. They literally create their own stamp on a printer, glue it on cardboard, and stick it on an envelope, and it's postage. I would like to point out that the recipient noted on this envelope, Gary Fletchner, WJHC, is now a silent key, but he was one of my stamp collecting Elmers. I spent many a lunch hour 30 years ago emailing back and forth with him, and he was definitely one of the good ones. This card from French Antarctica is called a maximum or maxi card. It literally is just a card with the stamp on it, and the stamp is canceled. Note on the stamp that there are two hands that are reaching from each side of the globe, and they're shaking, which I think is kind of neat. You know, it's the little things that just blow me away. All right. And let's get back to terra firma, USA. There's a number of first day covers from when the United States radio stamp was first issued in 1964. And these are but a few, believe me. There's a few reasons behind this stamp. And the first story I ever heard was that the stamp was issued in recognition of ham radio operators assisting with traffic after the Alaska earthquake and tsunami of March 27 and 28 in 1964. It was and still is to this day the largest earthquake ever recorded on the United States land at a magnitude of 9.2. The second story is that this was issued to recognize the 50th anniversary of the ARRL. There's no mention of this on the stamp, as other countries have so keenly included on theirs. This cover came with a decorative metal plate that was adhered after machine cancellation. Imagine that, trying to go through one of the cancellation machines today. That wouldn't fly. And here's one with Hiram Percy Maxim on the cover. And note the mobile operation depicted on this cover. Tell me that this was not an interesting sight to see in the mid-60s going down the road. Okay, these military envelopes from World War II are quite rare. Now, I realize the Victory stamped one in the background of the radio technician may not be ham related, but it probably reflects the military role that this gentleman had. I've known quite a few radio technicians who became hams after the war. The second salutes the fighting hams and acknowledges that amateur radio came to a halt during the war and that the operators used their know-how and talents towards speeding the day of victory. Actually, one of my favorite covers. Okay, finally, the part of my collection that I consider to be the most challenging is amateur radio in space. Did you know that military bases and then NASA issued first day covers for rocket launches? Okay, it's still a practice that's commonplace around the globe. The cancellation shows the date and location of these launches. And usually the type of rocket is almost always on the cover. And now a very small percentage of these launches include amateur radio satellites. So many of the covers of these envelopes that are coming up include a list of the rocket's payloads printed either right on the envelope or in an insert card. So I cross-checked with AMSAT and similar websites to gather dates of Oscar and other amateur radio satellite launches. There's a total of 121 Oscar satellites out there. I have about 15 or so covers for them. So I've got a long way to go. But here's a sample of what I have. Oscar, short for orbiting satellite carrying amateur radio. Here's Oscar 1. Launched December 12th, 1961. This is Oscar 5, launched on January 23rd, 1970. And note that the other payroll on this launch was a weather observation satellite. Here's another one from Oscar 5, just to show one with different artwork. And now here is an insert card from the previous cover. The Oscar satellite is mentioned in one sentence at the end. Here's Oscar 7 highlighted on an AMSAT cover. And Oscar 8. Oscar 13. Oscar 24. You note smack dab in this very center of that envelope, the cover says that it's from the Radio Amateur Club. So pretty neat that these satellites are still being launched this way. Now here's a maxi card from Oscar 24, complete with signatures of the launch team. And those signatures are on the bottom right there. And this is from AMSAT P3A. Is this rare? I really don't know. The satellite would have been called Oscar 9, but the rocket exploded on launch. And to my knowledge, only successful launches were allotted first day covers. So how this got out, I'm not sure. And lastly, amateur radio on STS-9, the Space Shuttle Columbia, the first amateur radio operation from Earth's orbit. Now, if you're remotely interested in starting a collection of launch covers, let me know, because I have a number of ways you could search for them. Now, how to start? If something like this sparks your interest, collecting stamps is, for the most part, very inexpensive. With few exceptions, stamps in this thematic category go for less than $1 or $2. Now, QST announces new stamp issues worldwide. Go to stamp shows or flea markets. Ask postcard vendors if they have QSL cards, and take the time to look through them, because assuredly there's going to be special event envelopes and cards with postage. Resources come and go, and in the beginning I relied a lot on eBay. Now we have so much more. Hip Stamps, Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, Stamp World, APS.org. That's the American Philatelic Society. And just Google it. I can't tell you how many times I've stumbled across other collections, ham radio collections, just by searching for stamps. There's a terrifically comprehensive database on Amateur Radio-Philately that's sponsored by the Colorado State University system. And over the last 30 years, I have spent hundreds of hours researching, and now you have it all in one place. And the URL it's noted right here. And you can always contact me. I am in the roster. Very plain slide. So in wrapping up, please remember that the United States postage does not expire. I make sure to include the U.S. amateur radio stamp on any ham-related mail that I send. I brought a handful of these stamps today, and regardless of whether you are interested in collecting stamps or not, I encourage you to take one. It is a piece of history that you are responsible for perpetuating. For those at home, let me know if you want one. And again, I'm in the roster, and that's the end. Any questions? The only one that we have in the United States is that one, this one, the purple one. Yes.
Hey, Jeannie?
Well, they were at one point. Yeah. Yeah. No. We're talking normal circulation for many of these.
Is the U.S. amateur radio stamp still circulating?
Yes, they are. They're not being made anymore. They're not printed anymore, but I have seen them come and go. You can still buy sheets of them online. Yes, you can still use the postage because the postage does not expire, ever.
Hello, Jeannie.
Yes. Yes.
I just wanted to say, excellent presentation. You're not really presenting stamps as much as you're presenting history.
The question at home is, how do you not destroy the stamp? Well, as you saw on some of the covers that I scanned, those are complete envelopes. I wouldn't touch them for the world. I wouldn't try to soak the stamp off or anything. And the stamps, most of the stamps in my collection are mint unhinged, meaning they have never been stuck on an envelope. They've never even had a little tiny tab of hinge material to stick into a book. So you can get postage that is canceled and soaked off of an envelope, but then you're never going to know where that stamp came from, really. I mean, yes, it originated in, let's just say, France, for example, but you're not going to know its travel history. And sometimes that's just as important or more important than the stamp itself. Okay. Dave, KB9PRF, do you have a question?
No, more of a reply. You had an excellent presentation. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And you're not really collecting stamps, you're collecting history.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments?
Jeananne?
Yes.
Yeah, fascinating presentation. I have a large collection from my grandfather and from his father, and you've got me motivated now to go take a look and see whether or not I've got any amateur radio or radio stamps in there. So thanks for the motivation.
Very good. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Jeananne,
Yes, Bill.
I just wanted you to know that I had the same problem with my mother with buying a 25-cent package of stamps and then discovering when it got there that I kind of delayed a few days. Well, it got to be a lot more than 25 cents. And I swear to the day she died, we never forgot that incident.
Were you grounded too for a whole week?
I don't remember being grounded, but you did that with girls. You didn't do that with guys,
Oh, true. That's a good point. Good
Yep.
point.
Just
Well,
the luck of birth, you understand.
Yes.
Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you. Okay. Everyone at home, Gary is asking how much we have spent on this, and I plead the fifth. I don't remember, dear.
Ask him how much he spent on his satellite radios.
There you go. There you go. Thank you, Michael. Was there another
Or that
question?
color laser printer.
You mean to make the stamps?
I have sheets. Now they've got to be like acid-free sheets, regardless of what you use. But what I have are more of like a slip-in kind of page. Let me see if I can. Yes, and it's clear and crystal clear as ever. And you can get them for either holding postcards, an entire sheet, for example, or it's got a number of rows that you can tuck stamps behind. And again, you're not supposed to really be touching them with your hands because of the oils in your hands can ultimately eat through and make a mess of things. Fred. That's the part, okay, Fred was asking, how do you how does the stamp remain dry? Because it comes with glue on the back. And that's the glory of these pages, is they don't let humidity affect anything on the stamp. Therefore, that back will always stay dry. At least we can only hope. Okay, I guess one more question. I think I saw Greg commenting. Okay. Wanted to give you a chance. Anyone else? Well, Dave? I guess not. Thank you all for letting me ramble on. It's a passion. Thank you.